Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. As always, I have a fantastic and fascinating guest with me today, and his name is John David Latta. Did I say that right? Latta?
I respond to Latta or Latta, either way, but
Let's
usually
say
Latta.
Latta. Okay, I
Right.
thought I had it correct, and I really don't like getting people's names wrong. He is a mystic, author, teacher, founder, and former CEO of a multi-million-dollar consumer products company. His book is titled The Synchronicity of Love, where he shares his extraordinary story of hitting rock bottom, which then led him to a spiritual transformation. John now teaches workshops on leadership, healing, transformation, awakening, love, synchronicity, and wisdom that unite and expand the human experience. I absolutely love that. John, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. I'm very happy to be here.
It is an honor to have you here, and it's an honor to meet you. And you have really another one of those fascinating stories. So I'm just going to turn it over to you to tell the audience your story, how you got to where you are now, what the journey was like, the lessons you've learned, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow. Okay. All that in like 60 seconds, right? I'm
No,
just
I've got plenty of time.
kidding. Okay. So a little over 20 years ago, I was living a relatively charmed life, and then everything that could possibly go wrong all went wrong at the same time. My wife got cancer completely out of the blue. I went and started my own company after leaving my very secure job in corporate America, started my own company and promptly managed to dig us in the hole to the tune of $650,000.
Oh.
Um, and and at the same time, completely out of nowhere, and I considered myself an unreligious, unspiritual person to that point,
Mm-hmm.
had this unbelievable fear of death that just was shrouding me everywhere I went. And practically in the blink of an eye, I found myself divorced with custody of my two children, facing bankruptcy, not seeing any way out of the mess, and running around behind closed doors in abject fear that I was going to die, even though I was really healthy at the time. I don't know where this fear of death came from. And for almost 5 years prior to that, I had been reading books about people that had had spiritual experiences at retreats and things like that, but still consider myself a staunchly anti-spiritual person. But I was in such desperation, feeling like bad father, bad husband, bad businessman, and
Mm-hmm.
running around at the age of, I think I was 39, and just abject fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
I signed up for a retreat that Michael Crichton, the author, had attended 20 years earlier.
Wow.
And I really liked Michael Crichton, the author, and I really admired him and connected with him in a lot of ways. And this retreat just felt like a lifeline. I had no idea what I thought I was going to get out of it, but I signed up and I rationalized it by saying I'm already 650,000 in debt. By the way, 250,000 in personal credit card debt.
Oh.
That the extra couple thousand or so isn't going to matter. So I went, and I didn't have a lot of crazy spiritual experiences. Instead, the thing I discovered was I didn't realize how much I'd kept other people at a distance.
Mm.
And I'd never been in a retreat type atmosphere before. And it was really nice connecting with people in a deep, vulnerable way. I'd never done that before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A little bit of time goes by. I come back. I still have all sorts of pressures, but the weight of it is just a little bit lighter. It's strange. I'm being both what feels like both mom and dad to my kids, which was really unusual. I started a group therapy process. In the blink of an eye, I felt like I was the only guy with 10 women in the group and 2 women therapists. So I was a man alone most of the time. But it became obvious over time that both the spiritual retreat and the therapy, uh, I was exploring and opening, you might be say, becoming more whole to my feminine side, and everything that most people would call feminine, I was learning for the first time in my life. And it was freaking hard. It was. I mean, I really kind of identified with a man, and I was kind of competitive and all the typical kind of guy things. And and so my book, The Synchronicity of Love, it really explores the relationship between unconditional love and synchronicity. And by synchronicity, I mean those kind of amazing coincidences and miracles that start to happen more and more.
Hmm.
People feel like they're in the zone, they're in the flow. It's really amazing.
Hmm.
And the more I opened to this other side of myself, the more all these miraculous things started to happen.
Hmm.
And, there's a lot of spiritual experiences in there, but there's a lot of very human experiences. Just to give you an example of opening to the feminine side, I was, I'd been in management since I was 18 years old. So I was
Oh,
good at
wow.
bossing people around.
Hmm.
And so I was good at strategy and planning and, staying on task. And so, of course, I put my kids to bed the same way. Okay, come on, get in bed, read the story, lights out. And my son just was babbling away about his day excitedly. And I'm like, oh, God, would you be quiet? Because got to stay on schedule here. And I remembered in my group therapy group, the women kept getting on me about, John, you need to try being. You're so good at doing. I'm like, what the hell is being? I don't even know what that means. So I just thought, well, I'm just going to sit here and just listen, like really listen to my son
Uh-huh.
instead of rushing him. And about 10 or 20 seconds later, I was overwhelmed with this feeling of love, like a love I'd never felt in my life,
Mm,
just sitting there patiently listening to my son talk about his day.
mm,
And so it sounds like a little thing, but you might say in a way, I was learning to listen even in a way that
mhm,
I'd never had before.
mhm,
And so everything in my life began to change for the positive. And yet it was a difficult journey. I think anybody that goes through a kind of a deep inner transformation will say, wow, it was really worth it, but it was really difficult at
mhm,
times too. And I see you
mhm.
nodding, so you
Yes, yes,
know.
yes, I
And
know.
it was painful and challenging, but awesome at the same time.
Mhm,
And so in my book, I captured the last 20 years of my life, beginning with
mhm,
everything falling apart.
mhm. So I have to ask, I mean, what a fascinating story. But I have to ask too, as you're going through this transformation, and I really just want to reiterate for the audience, it's not like this straight upward smooth trajectory. It's more like it's more like an EKG or so, like maybe even tachycardia or AFib or something, up and down, up and down, up and down. It's just not a smooth process, and it is a lot of work, and it is very frightening because it takes you so far out of your comfort zone. Sometimes you don't even know your name.
Yep. Yeah, you nail it. That's exactly right.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yep.
Still trying to get over it. But I find it fascinating, so much of the story. But I really want to go back to that first retreat that you were talking about,
Mhm.
um, and how you were able to connect with people on a deeper level for the first time in your life. And I have to ask, was that uncomfortable?
It was uncomfortable, but the retreat made it so comfortable. I think it's more comfortable, or it's less comfortable to, like, the most painful thing to me was coming back from the retreat and re-entry into the quote unquote real
Oh.
world, and realize a lot of people don't want that sense of intimacy and
Mhm.
connection. And boy, I wish the retreat leader had said, warning, re-entry into the real world can be a little challenging.
Uh-huh.
And so I think on some level I really yearned for it, and I was beating myself up so badly over what felt like a whole string of failures. It was
Mhm.
actually nice being with people and having them talk openly. And there's a lot of amazing people there, but a lot of people were having real struggles themselves too.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think that the atmosphere of the retreat made it really. And it's funny. I shared on my Facebook page just yesterday or the day before, um, a therapist who said, the most common thing he gets from people is, "You must think I'm crazy," and like, "I don't think anybody understands me." And he goes,
Mhm.
"That yearning for a deeper, to be really
Mhm.
understood is so powerful." And he said, in his experience, sharing dreams is a way to restore connection and intimacy between people. And
Mhm.
he kind of pushes that, like, go
Mhm.
share the dream you had last night or last week or
Mhm.
last month, or maybe when you had as a
Mhm.
child with somebody, because it's
Mhm.
a way to restore that sense of connection and intimacy. and deeper understanding. And the retreat did focus a lot on dreams. And
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. I have four sisters, which, is why I now live in Denver. One of the reasons, that and the weather. But, small steel town in Western Pennsylvania. And all of my sisters and my mother had incredibly vivid dreams.
Yeah.
And we would always talk about them. Well, some of them were nightmares. Some of them were really funny. Some of them were, what do you think about this? What does this mean? And we even did it up until our adult years. And it was so funny because when we were talking about like nightmares and stuff that we would have, my father's worst nightmare was driving up to the ski resort and there was no snow. It's like, I think that's not that bad, but that was his worst nightmare. So it's really funny.
That's hysterical because my wife knows my worst nightmare, but I've been in management my whole life and I can't seem to shake it, is I go into some, company, store, organization, and I can't figure out who's in charge and what my responsibility is. And it's hysterical because I see in the dreams that everything's running just fine by itself. And I can't get used to that. So I know that's my
Yeah.
recurring nightmare. I know people have scary dreams of demons and, devils, and it's like, who's in charge here?
That is
What's my
hilarious.
responsibility?
Well, I still have recurring nightmares. This is really bizarre. I was a respiratory therapist for 17 years before I became a physical therapist. I mean, that was so long ago.
Yeah.
But I still sometimes will have nightmares that I'm working in a hospital as a respiratory therapist. I'm filling in as a PRN therapist. I don't know anybody. I don't know the hospital. They hand me a stack of patients, like, that I have to see. And I'm running around lost. And then before you know it, it's the end of my shift and I haven't done anything. And it's like, wow, how deep is that, rooted in me and my psyche. And then I also have dreams, nightmares about still being in physical therapy school and forgetting to take like a class, or, oh my gosh, this is due and I didn't even know it. I haven't done anything all semester. It's just crazy. Dreams are really funny.
They are really funny. It's funny because I also have a recurring dream. It's some version of, oh my God, I'm in school, but I forgot and I'm way behind now. And which is funny because I'm a college dropout. Like I never really had much of an academic background to begin with. And so,
Oh.
but I still have the dream of like, oh my God, I've been in this class for 6 months, but I've only been twice. I must be impossibly far behind now.
Okay, so that's the true nightmare of an overachiever.
Yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
you just in that one little brief statement, you kind of clarified your personality.
Yeah. No, I tell my wife all the time, I said, not every dream can be traced back to childhood. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of them can. A lot of them can be traced back to childhood, experiences growing up. But, I just have such an imprint of kind of being in charge of people in an
Mm-hmm.
organization going all the way back to the age of 18.
Wow,
It's pretty well imprinted in there.
yeah, that's definitely a very deep pathway that has
Yeah,
been dug. Yeah.
it's a
So
habit. Yeah.
it is. Kudos to you for getting out of it and being able to
Yeah.
change that. But I can't, I still keep going back to how intimidating and how frightening that must have been. And I love the story though about being the man alone in therapy with all
Yeah.
those women. I think that's hilarious, because I had, the same type of experience when I entered the world of martial arts. I was kind of like the lone woman,
Yeah.
this little middle-aged, ballet dancer, princess, surrounded by all of these men. And it was like really, really bizarre. But the funniest thing about that, once they got used to me, and I got used to them because there was definitely a learning curve on both sides.
Yeah.
These men were able to, I mean, they did so much to help me in my training, most of them anyway. They also really tapped into my femininity and my feminine energy. And they taught me how to use that as a tool in my training and to take down an opponent that way. I mean, it's just fascinating. And then once
I love it.
they really got into it, it was just amazing. And this is another thing, was just learning how to communicate with men. And I'm no judgment, just funny observation is, because I was used to my girlfriends and my sisters and my girl cousins, you're on the phone for like an hour or so. And the first time one of the guys actually called me to see if I wanted to meet him, do some extra training outside of class time. And, I was like, this is weird. A guy calling me, and I've been married for 17 years. No guy's called me in a long time. So I was like, okay. And we hung up the phone, and I was like, wow, I had no idea you could have an entire conversation with a few monosyllables, a couple of grunts, a see you at the end, and boom, that was it. 30 seconds, done. And I'm holding this phone going, where's the drama? It was just really,
Yeah.
it was hilarious. And it was just so liberating. And it was, and then of course they were using me as, a confidant and, everything from, relationship problems, what to get their wives for their birthdays, how to launder their ghee properly. I mean, it was just really an incredible relationship. So kudos to you.
Yeah, thanks. My wife teases me all the time because I always answer text messages with "on it, will do." Yeah. Yeah.
See,
And
I love
nothing
that.
else.
I love that. Get rid
Yeah.
of the drama. Get right to the point. So yeah, men and women do communicate in many different ways.
I
And
wanted to say, in the last 7 or 8 years, I've hosted a lot of, I'll loosely call them spiritual circles and groups here at the house. But that's exactly why I love doing co-ed work. A lot of people have said, John, you need to work with men. You need to work with men. But that's true. But the work is done in the co-ed circles.
Mhm,
It's beautiful to see how different we are and yet how similar we are.
mhm,
And when I started group therapy, I have a chapter in my book. It's a short, tiny little chapter right near the beginning. And I had my first ever, I'm going to call it warning dream. And the dream was, so I'm just about to start group therapy, right?
uh-huh,
And the dream was all the gals in the group saying, they're all talking amongst themselves, but I cannot kind of overhear them. They're saying, we're going to be peeling shrimp tonight, but I'm kind of worried about John. And I'm like, in the dream, I'm saying, well, why are you worried about me? I love shrimp. Well, peeling shrimp can be kind of painful and kind of messy. That's the end of the dream. Well, so the analogy was, think of shrimp. If you've ever, peeled a shrimp, it's got
mhm.
a hard shell on it. And so the analogy, the dream made perfect sense as time went on. I was really happy to peel the shell off those women, but I was not letting them peel the shell off of me.
Wow.
So that sort of masculine, overwhelming vulnerability I felt in a group full of all or mostly women was
Mhm.
really, really hard. I was ready to fix you and save you, but you are not getting under my shell.
Boy, I can really relate to that. That makes a whole lot of sense to me. I don't think that's weird at all.
Yeah, yeah. So I honestly think, I call it, embracing my feminine side, but the beginning was, can you stomach vulnerability?
And that's huge.
Yeah,
For men and for women,
yeah,
because I think I have a lot of masculine energy, believe it or not,
yeah,
and that kind of comes through in the dojo. But that is really, really hard to come to terms with being vulnerable.
yeah. Yeah, I almost think it's almost an instinctual protection. I think it goes back for who knows countless lifetimes,
Hmm.
generations.
Hmm.
It's actually, no matter what you think of social media, Facebook, and the internet, and it probably sometimes feels like an overwhelming amount of information. Let's just
Hmm.
call it just
Hmm.
stuff.
Hmm.
In a way, I think the beautiful thing is people are revealing themselves more and more in ways they
Hmm.
never did before.
Hmm.
And traditionally in sort of the work world, and I'm going back generations ago,
Hmm.
the man wasn't ever expected to be vulnerable or to reveal himself. And what
Right.
the only time men did might have been over beer at a bar
Hmm.
or something like that.
Hmm.
And because there was a genuine fear that they might say the wrong thing and lose their job or be outed in some way. In fact,
Hmm.
I think there's an almost instinctual fear of being, I'm going to call it, cast out by the tribe.
Hmm.
If you stray too far, you're out. And if you're out, you're probably not going to survive. And
Hmm.
so I love the willingness of people to be more open, more authentic, more vulnerable.
Hmm.
And I think it's a beautiful thing. And I think it's coming at us really quickly.
Do you think, now going back to the social media, because people are, you're right, they are being a lot more authentic, more
Yeah.
genuine, and more expressive of issues they might be having, or obstacles that they have overcome. And I wonder maybe if COVID even was the springboard for that, to give us
Yeah.
permission to, it's like, you know what, this is not a perfect world. I can't post pictures of me on my vacation because no one's going anywhere. I can't post pictures of, all of these lovely things that I'm doing because I'm stuck in my basement or my kitchen, and it's like, this is right. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think I have ever, and I like to cook, or at least I used to before COVID, but it's like, oh my God, in the morning, it's like one more day, I've got to cook 3 meals or two or whatever. It's like, oh, yeah. So I think it kind of gave us a little bit of permission to loosen up. And plus the fact that we don't have to look perfect
Yeah.
on camera. And that was another huge thing, is like, hey, this is it. This is me. If you don't like it, tough. I'm in my basement with my sweatpants on.
Yeah. No, I think it just, the bigger picture about COVID, just like everything out there, it's like, it sucks, but it's awesome at the same time.
Right.
I heard somebody say once, yeah, the world's getting better and getting worse at the same time. And
Right.
so that's how I felt about COVID. Yeah, it was kind of terrible. Yeah, it was kind of awesome at the same time.
Well, that's when I finally had to stop doing interviews in my basement with my guests and have to learn how to do them online. So it opened up a whole new world for me.
Yeah.
And, especially though, as a baby boomer, I'm not a huge fan of technology and I'm not very good at it. But boy, I got good real fast because I had to. Plus, I had a lot of time on my hands,
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, watched a lot of YouTube videos, how
Oh
to,
God.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's go back to, when did you decide, okay, you've had it with your corporate job. When did you decide to leave corporate America? When did you quit?
Yeah.
And was that terrifying? Did you already have the plan to start doing your coaching and teaching all these workshops and stuff? What was that transition like? Because that had to have been terrifying as well.
It was, but God, so in 2017, so I've been running my company for quite a few years, and my right hand man, Julie was her name. Uh, we did everything together, and the company was going through some logistical issues. My company had so many logistical issues, it was crazy. And she was ready to quit. John, I'm just sick of all the logistical issues, and I was too. I didn't want to say it, but I was feeling the same way. And she goes, I think I'm going to quit. I just can't stand this anymore. And so I went home and I thought about it. And I always admired like NFL football coaches, that make millions of dollars a year, that when their contract was up, they wouldn't turn around and sign a renewal right away. They'd go home and, maybe take a vacation for a week or so, and they would check in with themselves and go like, do I have the fire in the belly? Because being an NFL coach or a college football coach is a round the clock, year round kind of job. If you don't have the fire and the passion, you're just not going to be successful. And so I sat there and went, I'm just not into this anymore. But I didn't want to leave unless I had something else to step into, and I didn't know what that was. And but I part of coming into the sort of, I'm going to call it more feminine side, was realizing I actually have intuition and starting to listen to it. And I had the sense that if I didn't leave, things were going to start getting bad because my heart wasn't in it anymore. And there are people that are great entrepreneurs that love to start new companies, but they're really not built to run them. I'm not saying that was me, but the quicker they realize they're there to start companies, not to run companies, the better things go for them. But if they try to start it and run them and realize they're not good at what I would call bureaucracy and administration, it all goes to hell. So I went back to Julie and said, what if we sell the company? Let's prepare the company for sale, and I'll give you a stake in it. Would you stay? She said, yeah. And then we literally kind of reinvented the company to make it what I thought would be attractive to a big company who was doing what we were doing and could just absorb our business into theirs. And honestly, it took almost 2 years of reorging. But again, we had that, but we're going to sell the company. This is the whole purpose. And I actually wrote a chapter in my book about this whole process. And so I took everything I learned in the School of Hard Knocks and metaphysical experiences and said, here's the price I want. Here's the kind of buyer I want. And I'm not picking on Donald Trump, but I am a little bit. I don't want a Donald Trump type buyer. I want just an honest, straight shooter. No BS. Let's just, you want my company. I want to sell my company. Done. And it all worked out perfectly. Like I got the best buyer, the coolest guy. Like he's cracking jokes from the minute I meet him. And so the whole sales process, I put the company in the market and the whole thing was done in 6 months. I got exactly the price I wanted. I couldn't have asked for a better buyer. I couldn't have asked for a better process. It was freaking awesome. But between you and me, Cheryl, now I'm kind of retired and I sold it in October 2019 and 3 months later, COVID hit. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've got down and kissed the ground because the company who bought it had so many logistical supply chain issues, and those would have been mine if I kept the
Oh,
company.
God.
And so I was so grateful, but I have not stepped into retirement with ease, like, oh, yay, I want to just sit back with my feet up. And,
Right.
with COVID, it felt like double retirement because there's not a lot to do. And so I did write my book, and I'm out there promoting my book right now. But I don't say it was terrifying. I definitely was done doing what I was doing. But I also don't want to make it sound like it was an easy transition. I have a couple of guy friends. One's a retired fireman, and he's always asked me, "Hey, John, how's retirement going for you?" It's like, well, it's better than working. But it's not that great. And he feels the same way, but they make firemen retire when they're 55.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay, so I want to go back to the buyer that
yeah,
that
yeah,
you got connected with.
yep,
And so okay, we're getting geeky here, or we're getting a
yeah.
little bit ooh.
Okay.
But okay, because I know a lot of I know a lot of people talk about manifesting and putting it out to the universe, and it comes back to you. Do you feel that's what happened because you had the idea in your head of the exact type of buyer that you wanted, and what it was going to be like, and the whole experience, and it sounds like it went pretty smoothly considering that this is a really big deal that you're trying to
Yep.
get done and to have accomplished.
Yeah. Man, I go back and forth all the time between am I manifesting, which on some level it sure felt that way. I mean, I
Hmm.
definitely got exactly what I was looking for. But I think it goes deeper than that. And so uh, okay, I'm going to little sidebar here.
Sure.
Um, I had a dream. So probably like your sisters, I have a very vivid dream life, but it only started after I went to that retreat 20 years ago. And and dreams I love are the ones that feel really special. It feels like some kind of special guidance, not just like my mind trying to make sense of my day or afraid I missed class again. And
Or
so
showed up in your underwear.
yeah, I have this hyper vivid dream with Jesus. And it's funny, I didn't even think of myself as Christian. And in the dream, I'm fishing on this river, and it's late in the day. It feels like September. It's this beautiful late September evening. Sun is falling, and I'm out waist deep in this river, and I'm kind of feeling all these angry thoughts in my head. Stupid people on Facebook and the media, and just all the usual crap.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, I feel a light touch on my shoulder, and it's Jesus. And he goes, "Come on, we're going to take a walk." And in the dream, I'm fishing down at the lower end of a river, kind of near the mouth, and we're walking upstream on the water. We pass other fishermen and farmers. They don't see us, but I see them. And we go all the way up to the source of the river, which is like up in the mountains. And the river is much more, going down waterfalls is much more rapid there. And we come to a scene where police are fighting bad guys, you might say. There's, destroyed property and graffiti everywhere. And anyway, it's all cops and robbers. And
Hmm.
they're all clashing and fighting. And he points to the scene, and all he says to me is, "This is not your true north." And then we walk back downstream, again, walking on water. I'm waving to the farmers. They still don't see me. Back down, plop down, and my waiter's fishing again, and he disappears. And so here's my understanding of manifesting. If you are in alignment with what I'm going to loosely call your soul or your
Mhm.
divinity or your mission or anything like that, things get easier. And
Mhm.
it's not, in a way, I'm a powerful manifester, but in a way, it's easy because I'm doing what, you know, some people might say God wants me to do, or I'm in
Mhm.
alignment with what my soul wants. And so that he now kind of irked me because I'm very like structured. He didn't tell me
Yes.
what my true north was. He just told me what it wasn't. And so for me, I've been bossing people around and probably was a little too quick to be competitive and argumentative. And he's like, no, 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 you've done that before. You're good at that. That's not your true north anymore. And so in some ways, I was very clear about what I wanted, but I think I'm going to say it, my soul wanted me to sell the company, and I could feel the nagging little voice and said, Cheryl, there must be times in your life where you've been living a certain way and you kind of runs out of steam.
Mhm.
Some people will stay stuck because it's familiar and they're
Mhm.
afraid to step into something new. And
Mhm.
they're afraid to maybe create new habits instead of staying stuck in the old habits. And so that's a long answer to your question. I want to say, yes, I manifested. Yes, it was clear, but it also worked out well because it was time for me to sell the company.
Wow. Okay, there's several things I've got to say about this. Number
Okay.
one, I want to go back to the river and the dream because that's so fascinating. But you are the third interview I have done so far this week who's kind of had that same type of spiritual experience
Ah,
and connecting with the soul and
yeah.
of course hitting rock bottom, which I have my own personal story of hitting rock bottom more than once and coming out of it like that. But it's just so fascinating that this has kind of been the theme for the week. And I think that there's a lot more individuals out there who've had these types of experiences, and I just love hearing them because it's so empowering. It's just so positive and encouraging compared to some of the stuff that we hear on the news and from other
Yeah.
people sometimes. It's just thank you for sharing that. That's awesome.
Ah,
Going back to the river,
okay.
are you a fisherman?
Yes, I
Okay.
not as much now, but I was obsessed with fishing my whole life, and a lot of my early dreams were fishing dreams.
Okay, because I
Yeah,
wondered if that was just came out of nowhere or if you had been a fisherman.
yeah.
And did it shock you when you saw Jesus, or was it like, oh, hey, you're here?
In the dream, it was so magical and beautiful. It's like it was so real. Like we're walking on water upstream on this river, and I see
That's
farmers, and I'm waving like hi, and it left a warm feeling in my body. And
mm-hmm,
to this day, Judith Orloff wrote a really good book called Second Sight, and a good portion of her book is about dreams and the many
uh-huh,
different kinds of dreams. And I think she would call that a guidance dream or a psychic dream rather than a pure, just like psychological type
mm-hmm,
dream.
mm-hmm,
And she said she just loved those dreams, and they would kind of even in her waking for 2, 3, 4 days, it would be this like sort of happy, warm feeling.
mm-hmm,
That's what it feels like both in the dream and afterwards. Like but the part of me like, come on, tell me what to do. Is a little frustrated that it's like he told me what I'm not supposed to do, but not what I am supposed to do. And in fact, it's so funny. I had another dream with Jesus in it. It's again so funny because while I was raised Catholic, I stopped going to church when I was 13 or 14. I never went
mm-hmm,
back.
mm-hmm,
And so in this other dream, I'm walking around. I'm at the Last Supper with Jesus. It looks like that painting. And I walk around the table in front, and him and all of his disciples or apostles
mm-hmm.
are sitting there. As I walk around the front, he looks at my feet. He says, John, you're wearing the wrong shoes. But as soon as I look down, before I can see my feet, I wake up. So I still couldn't well, what shoe should I be wearing?
Oh,
And
that
but
that
those
is
sort of what I would
hilarious.
call those sort of psychic guidance dreams, they're really
Mm-hmm,
beautiful.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm trying to, there's some incredible symbolism behind that. I know there must be, of
Yeah.
showing up, at the Last Supper wearing the wrong shoes. And I guess
Yeah.
maybe that's how important it is to be able to find your ground or to be grounded or whatever. But that's so
Yeah.
funny. And
Yeah.
I love that. I actually, after my mother passed away, and my dad actually passed away 19 days after my mother did. So it was just like this really crazy, crazy time in life that,
Yeah.
really happens. And of course, I was taking care of her in hospice at home, for like two months before she passed away. And, have been coming back to Denver and trying to get my practice back up and stuff because I had my own private physical therapy practice and I'd been gone for a really long time. And I can remember one night just rolling over in bed and she was standing right next to me.
Ah,
And there was this glow all around her, and she was wearing like a white gown or something, and she was just smiling at me, and she just kept touching my hair and stroking my face. And I swear it went on forever. It was like forever. And when I woke up the next morning, I was just, oh, I was
yeah,
just so happy. And it was like so light, and it was just, oh, what a wonderful dream. And my mom came to visit me and stuff to kind of pay me back for taking such good care of her. But it was funny because during those few months after she had died, I would always feel her presence next to me,
yeah.
at different times of the day and whatever. And I was still in this warm, fuzzy feeling. And I was driving down to ballet class that morning. And then all of a sudden it hit me. It went, oh my gosh, maybe this means that she has made the complete transition.
Hmm.
And that was her way of saying goodbye. I'm leaving you now.
Ah.
I know, but it was very sweet. It was very sweet.
Those are
And
beautiful dreams. Like,
I
I
know.
love stuff like, I've only had a few like that, and it's always random people. It's not who I think would come visit me. It was somebody who kind of was like, well, yeah, I guess we did have kind of a connection. So I don't really understand that process. But little things like that also help me start to get over my fear of death.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I didn't ask for such experiences. I didn't even believe in such experiences,
Yeah.
but like yours is beautiful. And it's just the
Oh,
sense of like, this isn't my mind just trying to soothe me,
right.
this is not that at all.
Because it was so real. I could even
Yeah,
smell her perfume. I mean, it was
yeah,
just so real. But
yeah.
and I remember her telling us this was a long time ago when her dad, my grandfather, was still alive, and he had a dream where he was walking along a river, and all of a sudden this beautiful man appeared, and that this man was so beautiful. And my grandfather was so excited about this dream, and he was trying to share it with my grandmother, and she started to get upset right away. And so he just shut down, and he didn't tell her the rest of it. But I think he did share it with my mom. But so when you said the river and Jesus and this beautiful man, it had to be him.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I love stuff like that.
I
And
think,
I'll just,
that what I took from that dream I had with the river, some of the symbolism was, I'm a man in my 60s now. And
mhm,
I think he was trying to say it might be more right and appropriate for a teenager to be fighting and clashing and kind of asserting their independence and fighting with police. But you're an old man now, and I tried to, I was thinking about the symbolism of a river because, I live in Seattle and you're like in Denver. I mean, most rivers are born in the mountains and they're they move really swiftly. There's
mhm,
waterfalls, there's rapids, and then eventually that kind of hit, the valley, and you might say the river becomes useful, like to farmers.
mhm,
And then the very last, before it flows into, the ocean or another river or lake, that kind of be more representative of elderhood, I guess.
mhm.
And I have had this sort of inner struggle between loving to be that wise elder, the sage, but still loving that kind of rebellious fighter in me.
See, I think they can go hand in hand.
Yeah,
And yeah, and I do take issue with that older person in your 60s. I'm
yeah,
in my 60s. I'm not an
yeah,
older person.
yeah,
And it's just like, and it's really funny because, of course, I know I'm getting older, but I
yeah.
actually feel younger in my 60s than I did when I was in my 30s, because I think when I was in my 30s, I must have had the weight of the world, and
Yeah.
carrying that. And I was the mother of the universe. And let me tell you, that is really not a good place to be. It just saps your joy for life.
Yeah,
So once I got rid of all of that, it was a lot more fun and a lot more joyful, even to be a person in my 60s.
yeah.
And yeah, it's just been a really interesting time.
But I could offer wisdom on Facebook instead of just arguing for the sake of arguing on Facebook. That's the habit I had to start getting out of. You
Oh,
know,
good for you for doing it, though. You did it.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. So did you ever figure out where that fear of death had come from, or where it
Well, gosh, no. I think part of it is I had no understanding whatsoever about being in alignment with my soul. I wouldn't even
Uh,
listen to somebody who said something like that. But clearly, I was so defensive against spirituality, um, and for 30 years. I'll tell you, I think I was 13, I was walking to church with my parents. And in our Catholic church tradition, a woman had to cover her head when she entered a church. And if she didn't, it was a sin.
mhm.
This day, my mother's walking in without covering her head. I say, hey, mom, you forgot to cover your head. That's a sin. She's like, no, they changed the rules. They decided it's not a sin anymore. And I was flabbergasted. Like, I thought the Bible was written by God. You think people can write this and you change their mind? And it was so overwhelming that almost in that instant, I rejected all spirituality and all religion.
Mhm.
And I completely forgot what I was going to say about that.
Oh, that's okay, but it'll probably come to you. And if it does come to you at 3 o'clock in the morning, do feel free to text me because I'm usually awake in the middle of the night around 3 o'clock.
Oh
Um,
no.
but that, I mean, but that is really fascinating because I was raised Byzantine Catholic, which is Eastern European
Uh-huh.
Catholicism, and it's a beautiful religion. But I mean, we had the same priest he was in that parish for 50 years, which is kind of like unheard of. And I swear he was close to Satan. I really do. I mean, he was not a nice person.
Yeah.
And the religion was actually quite lovely, but as soon as I could say, I ain't going, I did stop going. But it was through my troubles and stuff that it was like, came back to not going to a formal service
Right.
because I realized that nothing interfered more with my spirituality and my relationship with God than going to church.
Yeah.
And I would rather have a relationship with him rather than have his messages filtered through somebody else and then regurgitated in the way of man. So I
I'm
understand what you're
totally with
saying.
you. It was Michael Crichton's book, Travels, a nonfiction book, sort of his autobiography, that was kind of the gateway and the door opener to everything for me. And he
Hmm.
has a chapter in there, and he talked about it in a couple of places called direct experience.
Mm.
And he was actually referring to somebody else writing an essay about how little we actually experience for ourselves. And what we know to be true about the world, we get from family, friends, church, the media, schooling, and so he was so flabbergasted when he read that because he actually did come from a very academic background, graduated from Harvard Medical School, very smart
Hmm.
man, that he, I think at the age of 30, said, screw it. I'm going to go take every single thing that I think I know about, but have never actually experienced. I'm going to go try it for myself. That was why he went to that retreat in the mountains. The
Wow.
leader of that retreat was Dr. William, he goes by his middle name, Brew Joy, in
Hmm.
1982. I went in 2002, 20 years later. And so you might say, that's another way of saying, I think he also is going down the path of, I want a direct experience of God, not the
Hmm.
filtered experience, which I mean, I'm sure your age, my age, it's actually sobering how much everybody has their own filter on everything.
Hmm. It's sobering and it's very frightening at the same time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would
So
rather make up my own mind, give me
same.
the facts and then go away. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty amazing. So now, what made you start teaching workshops? And tell us a little bit about your workshops, how that came about, and a little bit more about the topics and how you run your workshops.
Well, the most common one prior to COVID was a group I call Something True, and it was kind of an accident. I had a couple that had decided, the guy was in a men's group and the gal, his wife, was in a women's group. It's like, what if we did co-ed and we shared the best teachings from both? And it was this great idea. And for a while it was popular, but the wife who was in charge of it was so overladen with, I'm going to call it rules and structure and rules and structure. And, every group needs a little bit of structure.
Uh-huh.
But too much just kills it, that people stopped coming. I mean, it was 4 hours once a month, like a Sunday afternoon from like 1 to 5 p.m. The first 2 hours we're going over rules. And, and she just, I don't know. she had kind of a love affair with structure and rules, and it helped her feel safe. But for everybody else, it was like, Jesus, I'm so locked down. I don't even know what I can say now. And so
Right.
the group fell apart. And at the last minute, I said, what if we just had a group where we just had a potluck dinner? Everybody comes over and eats together. And then we just circle up and just check in. Very loose structure. What's going on in your life? But be as
Mhm.
open, honest, authentic, and vulnerable as you can. And there's a little, kind of create a heart-centered space. And they're like, oh, whatever, John, if you want to do that, you can just do that. So screw it. I'm going to do that because I think people would like that. As little structure as possible. And the first time I did it, I had so many people come, I didn't even know what to do with them all. Like 30 some odd people came. And I probably hosted it probably 30 times. And I'd say the smallest amount I've had was 16 people, and the most was 40. And it's amazing. You get a co-ed group of people. And honestly, Cheryl, 25% of the people that come, I never met them in my life. I don't even know how they find out about it. And they come and we just circle up, create this heart-centered space where people kind of feel safe. It feels like
Mhm.
a safe space.
Right.
And I encourage them, just be as open, honest, and truthful as you're willing to be in this group. And you never know what's going to come out. I mean, beautiful things come out, suicidal thoughts come out. But, maybe I am tapping into my Catholic tradition a little bit. In a way, it's kind of like a giant heart-centered confession. But there's
Mhm.
something kind of cathartic about not only releasing it, but also hearing all the struggles that everybody else is going through. And the only problem I ever had with that group was when it was over, I could never get anybody to go home. Yeah. And so I've had a variety of teaching workshops and things like that. That one's been the most popular and the most enduring. And it just, I think, again, it almost harkens back to that first time in 2002 where I hadn't realized how much I'd kept people at a distance.
Mhm.
And so that desire to kind of create a safe, intimate space for people to kind of let their hair down.
Mhm. I just have two comments to make about that whole thing.
Yeah,
Is like you said, it was kind of like a confession, but it was
yeah,
confession without judgment.
exactly. Exactly.
And
Thank you
when
very
you
much.
have that flexibility or that permission to be able to share something, and it's not going to be judged, or you're not going to be shamed or whatever, there's a lot more freedom to be able to share some of our deep dark secrets.
Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. I forgot that's part of my minimal structure at the beginning. Like,
Mhm.
it's not your job to save this person, rescue this person, judge this person, criticize this person. Just listen with an open mind, open heart. And there is something that can be healing in itself. Just
Mhm.
listening, deep
Oh,
listening with an open
absolutely.
heart, open mind. I actually think sometimes people, when they're really being listened to, when you're holding space for another person,
Mhm.
they'll come up with their own answers, which is the
Mhm.
ultimate empowerment.
Mhm.
And I've seen that time after time. And my little voice tells me a lot of times, just shut up, John. Just listen.
I love that ultimate empowerment. I did
Yeah.
write it down. So there was something else I wanted to ask you. Oh, yes, or just point out the irony, I think, is just so rich of you and this woman creating this group, and she's the woman,
Yeah.
all the structure, and because most of the time I would imagine the woman would not be as
Yep.
structured, and there you are. No, we have to have these more free style flowing type of process. That I think is hilarious. That's just amazing to see how far you've come.
Thank you very much. And actually, that's really exciting to me you said that, because I actually think to a certain extent, that's everybody's journey. It's like,
Hmm.
for all I know, she's been very free flowing her whole life. I don't know her really well. And
Hmm.
maybe she is actually learning what I would call masculine structure and order
Hmm.
and the value of that. She's just, in my mind, got a little overboard with it. And I can see myself maybe going a little overboard with no structure. Okay, maybe a little bit of structure is better.
Uh-huh. Oh,
So
but I just love that the freedom to be able to explore,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think is really so valuable.
yeah.
So, John, tell us now where people can find you, where they can get your book, all
Yeah.
your social media, your website. Of course, that will be in the show notes, but just
Yeah.
tell us.
Website is johndavidlatta.com. My last name is Latta, johndavidlatta.com. You can find everything there. My book is called The Synchronicity of Love: Stories That Heal, Transform, and Awaken. It's told in a unique format. It's 119 true or mostly true stories,
Wow.
all short stories. They're designed for people like me that have fairly short attention spans, that kind of like to just pick up a book and read a few kind of magical stories before they go to sleep. It's the kind of books I
Mhm.
like. I also learn best when I read about the experiences of others. So I try to tell it in sort of person experiential way.
Mhm.
And you can find the book on Amazon and any other place that books are sold.
Okay, excellent. I have just loved having you on the show. This has just been so full of wonderful surprises and information. What final pearl of wisdom would you drop on the audience before we sign off?
So this has been my journey, but I have a hunch I'm not alone. I kind of describe growing up as, in a way, building brick walls around myself without knowing I was doing it. Those brick walls are uh, learning from experiences.
Mhm.
And, but I think there comes a point in life where it's okay to start dismantling those brick walls. And you can literally sort of die and be reborn over and over and over again. And I like, there's a quote from Rilke that says, "Some evening, take a step out of your house, which you know so well.
Mhm.
Enormous space is near." So I would encourage people to step out of their house they know so well and partake of some of that enormous space and allow their identity to continue to grow and change and evolve.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. That was pretty, there was a lot in that statement, and loved hearing that. John, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It is an honor to know you, and I just love hearing your story, and I love seeing and hearing about all the wonderful things that you're doing. So please keep in touch and let us
I
know if
will.
there's anything else, any more magical dreams or little tributaries or whatever in your in your life and everything, your journey, what you're doing.
I will. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show, Cheryl. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for being here. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you as always. And do check out John's website, follow him on social media. I have a funny feeling you'll be just enchanted with some of the information and some of the things that he posts. I did take a peek at the social media the Facebook page this morning. So wonderful guy. And again, thank you all so much for listening. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.